Welcome back to the shop, my friends. Steve here. In today's video, I have a quick little tutorial because recently I decided I wanted to put together a Mordheim Witch Hunter Warband. And to go along with those miniatures, I wanted some custom cobblestone bases. So let me show you how I put mine together. I resin printed a warband from Bestiarum Miniatures. Their style is super grimdark and will work great for my Witch Hunter group. I'm going to start by fabricating the cobblestone since these are going to take the longest to dry, and I'm going to use some DOS terracotta air drying clay. This will be pressed into some diorama debris silicone molds, which I'll be sure to link below. At this point, I don't really care about the color of the clay, but it seems that the terracotta has a different consistency compared to the other colors, and that's what I'm going for. I make sure to wear some gloves because this clay will stain your hands, and then I'll knead the clay to soften it up. The heat from my fingers will make it easier to press the material down into the silicone mold. Once complete, I'll use a palette knife to scrape off any excess material. After the clay's been pressed down into the mold, I'm going to put these molds in the freezer for about 10 to 15 minutes. Now this step is very important because it freezes the bricks just enough that they could be easily demolded. Otherwise, to stop any deformation of the bricks, you'd have to let them cure completely in the mold, which would take quite a bit longer. While I allow the bricks to dry, I'm going to work on some base debris. I have a toaster in my shop specifically for this type of a process, but I'll take leaves and sticks from outside and I'll place them in the oven, and then I'll heat these to dry them out and get rid of any types of molds or parasites. The sticks in particular I'll pull aside because I might be able to use them on future dioramas. Taking my dried leaves, I'm going to grind these up in a coffee bean grinder. The leaves can be pressed in but not too tight because I want the blades to be able to do their work. Now this is going to be a multi-step process because notice when they first come out, some of the leaf chunks can be pretty big, which for certain diorama aspects would be great, but I need a finer powder. So after putting all the leaves through the first pass, I'll then take what's ground up and I'll run it through the grinder again. Because the pieces are more compact, this time when it's ground up, it gives a completely different texture. From here, I'm going to use a sifter, and I'm going to separate this mixture even further. By tapping it against the mason jar, it'll separate the more coarse fibers from the thinner powder. This powder specifically is what I'm going to be using on my cobblestone bases. But notice that I'm keeping multiple separations because I may be able to use each type of texture for a different application in the future. Now of course there are model and train stores out there that do sell this type of debris that you can sprinkle onto the surface. But I found a lot of diorama supplies can get fairly expensive, so it is nice to know that you could just go out to the forest, grab some leaves, and as long as you sterilize them, this is going to be perfect to build with. Now Mordheim is a pretty old game, so the majority of the miniatures back then used 25mm square bases. Now me personally, I like the look of the circle over the square, so that's what I'm going to be using for mine. Now that my cobblestones are dry, I can start to adhere them to the bases using some Bob Smith gel superglue. And a thing to note is that I do have a little bit of wiggle room before the glue sets. And because these are made out of that terracotta clay, any of the cobblestones that are hanging over the sides, I could easily trim to fit using a hobby knife. When I'm applying the cobblestones to the base, I am trying to keep in mind that I don't want them all uniform. I would like each base to have a unique look on its own, so that means that sometimes the cobblestones will be broken or missing completely from certain areas. Before I get into the prepping and painting stages, I like to keep my base rims clean, and to do that I'm going to cut some frog tape into some small strips. To act as a mortar in between my cobblestones, I'm going to be using some unsanded grout. Now I'm using a tan color, but it doesn't really matter here because I'm going to be painting over all of it anyway. As you see here, I have a pretty fluid consistency, and that's exactly what I'm looking for because I'm going to be using some hard bristle brushes to press the grout down in between the stones. After the grout has had a chance to dry, I can then take a sanding sponge and remove any excess material on the surface. This will also help give the base a more uniform height. Next up, I'm going to seal the cobblestones and the grout with a mixture of watered down PVA glue. This is mixed with some distilled water to a slurry consistency, is also brushed onto the surface and down into the nooks and crannies. This will definitely make sure that the grout is locked in, plus it will also help protect the stones. It's finally time to start the painting process, and my first step is going to be apply some Liquitex Heavy Body Mars Black to the surface. This is going to be applied to cover all of the stones and the grout. Next up, I'm going to take some neutral gray number 5, and I'm going to mix that with a little bit of the Mars Black. This is going to be dry brushed across the stones using a minimal amount of water. A part 2 to this is a little bit more of that neutral gray and a little bit less of the Mars Black. Using some Liquitex heavy body burnt sienna, a wash is going to be applied to each base. After that wash had been allowed to dry, one more dry brush of the neutral gray is added to the top. And here's where some magic will start to happen. I'm going to use those ground leaves from the beginning. Using more of that watered down PVA glue and a detail brush, the adhesive is going to be applied to the exposed areas of the bases, as well as in between some of the larger sections of the cobblestones. The bases can then be dunked into the ground up leaf mixture, giving an awesome, really natural looking texture to the surface. Now for my process, I'm pretty much using just the mixture that was finely ground up, but you could always add more of that coarse material just to break it up even more. And after the miniatures are pinned in place, I might just do that. I now have bases that are completely unique for my Witch Hunter Warband. So hopefully this video tutorial was helpful to you in showcasing how to make your own custom cobblestone bases. And if you're into miniature painting, terrain building, and 3D printing, I've got a lot more in store, so feel free to subscribe to this channel and follow along.